Are your date nights a disaster? Well, whether you're married 50 years or single, if you are going on your date and it is a disaster, we have some awesome input for you today. We have Rabbi Shafier coming to us, and he is from the Schmooze, and he is going to walk us through step by step. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is unbelievable. We have today Rabbi Shafier, and here it is. Here's the thing you got to understand. Rabbi Shafier, besides starting the Schmooze and having 10,000 followers out, constantly and being bombarded by 1 million people, he's been a teacher for 15 years before he started the Schmooze, which I don't know how many years that's been. Everybody knows him. He's world famous. Here's the thing. He is going to walk us through date night disasters, and start typing your questions in right now. What do I do? How do I do it? Whatever. But first of all, welcome to the show, Rabbi. Very excited to have you on.
Thank you, Mr. Rishama. I appreciate it.
Great to have you. We go very fast, very deep here. So I'm going to start with a really, crucial question for you, which is, you had said to me that there is one big game changer, like your relationship was this way before, and then now your relationship is that way, like overnight, instant change. And that is the one thing that is makes the biggest impact on your marriage. And what is it, Rabbi?
Okay, if I had to put it into that capsule, and you did a very good job of building it, but here we go. Re'im ahuvim, best friends who love each other. But that's the criteria, best friends who love each other. And you have to keep both in mind, meaning to say, you have to be friends, and you have to remember what friends do. The friends make space for other people. Friends forgive. Friends are tolerant. But you also have to be lovers. It has to be Re'im ahuvim, best friends who love each other. And unfortunately, if both components aren't functioning, there's a lot of friction. And if you learn to focus on both parts of that, I think it changes a marriage dramatically. Well, hopefully we'll get into a little bit how that plays out.
Can you explain that? What do you mean, like best friends and lover? I'm lost a little bit in terms of what that means we should actually do. What action does that make us have to take?
All right. So first of all, what happens is if you're married more than 2 years, you get into this rut. This is just natural. We're married already. It's good. And I have to remind couples on an ongoing basis regularly, you have to maintain the romance. You have to maintain the connection. I don't know how to say it. I only know how to say it one way. You're supposed to be having a love affair, an ongoing love affair with your spouse. But that requires a lot of attention, a lot of spending time together. It requires the gifts and the tokens and the little notes. It requires going out on a regular basis, but going out once a week. It also means mini vacations. It's doing all the things that lovers do to maintain that connection, that bond, the part of being lovers within the marriage. So that part is it may be intuitive when you're going out, when you're originally chassan and kala, when you're engaged. But what happens is after a little while in the marriage, if you're not going to really focus on it intentionally, then what happens is it just becomes one of those things you forget to do and you start drifting apart. So that's really, that part I think is pretty easy, right?
Yes, we have a lot of questions coming in. Can I just ask him one question, then you'll go? Okay. My question is, I didn't understand what you had said in our pre-show interview. You had said that date night is the game changer. I'm answering the question I'm asking you. I just want to make sure, is that what your rabbi is talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So let me say this. Without date night, you're in big trouble. And date night is a game changer provided you understand it in context. And date night is a time when you as a couple go out and you connect, you bond, you spend dedicated time just being with each other, just connecting and just reigniting. But it's not the whole package. It's a big part of it. And date night alone could make a huge, huge difference. And by the way, I counsel people on a regular basis. I've dealt with literally hundreds of couples at this point. Many times, all that's lacking is that sort of just spending time together, that connecting. And date night alone makes a huge, huge difference. But I want to qualify. And date night is a part of an entire package. It can't be, we go out Tuesday night and then, we ignore each other the rest of the week. It's a part of keeping that romance, keeping that connection, keeping as lovers within the context of the marriage. But yes, date night is a key and critical component. And I can't recommend it highly enough. And especially if you're having any sort of, difficulty in a marriage or the strife, or there's anything like that, and date night then is vital, is imperative. But again, it's a part of an entire package of being lovers, and that goes with everything that lovers do.
What's the difference between a date night with a married couple and date night, because a date night with single people? Because we got a lot of questions about that so far.
Okay, that's an excellent question. So the key distinction is, what are you looking to do? So when you're going out in the process of discovering whether this person is for you, what you're doing is you're trying to connect with the person, you're trying to get to know them. In a sense, you think you're building a relationship, but for anyone who's not married yet, I got a little secret to tell you. You're not going to know the person until you're married. And as much as you think you know them, you won't. You're going to wake up 6 weeks or 6 months after the marriage, and you're going to say, oh my goodness, who is this person that I married? And by the way, that happens all the time. I don't know the real numbers, but it's 50%, 60% of couples wake up some point and they say, oh my goodness, I made the biggest mistake in my life. I married the wrong one. Now, it's not true that they married the wrong one. And what happened is, when you're going out, there's a natural sort of infatuation. There's a natural sort of like, he looked at her, she looked at him, the violins went off, and that sort of natural sense of infatuation took over. That is a gift that Hashem gives for a couple to begin the process. But that infatuation has a very, very real shelf life. It has a window and it stops. It might be 6 months, it might be a year, but it stops. And that's when the marriage begins. You see, what infatuation does, and what you're learning when you're going out, when you're single, is you're learning how to court, how to act towards your potential spouse. When you're married, after a year or 2 years or 10 years, you have to sort of reflect back on, how did I act when we were courting, and then imitate that behavior now, because the infatuation stage is an ideal teacher to show you how to act, what to do. And that's exactly what you find when couples are infatuated in the early stages. They have this perfect behavior. She's so enamored with him. He's so taken with her. They give each other the exact proper attention. All you have to do is keep that going, imitate that throughout your marriage, and you'll have a very, very successful marriage.
So what are date night disasters? Do you have stories for us that can illustrate like what people do wrong?
Yeah. Okay. First date night disaster is like this. No family business discussed on the date night. Meaning, what happens to couples after a short little while is they become co-managers of the family business. The kids, the finances, the house, the laundry. And then they go out, and this is an ideal time of 3-4 hours together. Let's discuss all of the family business. And they bring out the laundry list, and they go through all of the activities that they have to sort of manage. And that destroys a date. Why? Because what you're looking to do is to connect, not to be busy with everything that you're not. You're looking to get away from that. And you're looking to remember that you're also lovers, you're best friends who love each other. But in the busyness of life, what happens is we get so caught up with the details, so caught up, and again, for very good reasons. We have jobs and responsibilities and kids and everything that goes along with it. But there has to be a break where we don't discuss business, family business. We just bond, we connect, we enjoy each other's company as we used to when we were single.
So what is the difference between, like, when he's supposed to talk about the fact that he hurt your feelings by saying this, and he didn't do the dishes that he said he was going to do, and blah, 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 blah. How do you solve that?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Richheimer. That's disaster number 2.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Bringing up issues on the date. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. An issue is...
Sorry, but maybe before we get to disaster
we'll get piles of questions. Okay.
Let's just ask, because someone asked specifically to this disaster number 1.
Okay.
From the family, said, how do you go out and not bring up your kids? It's so hard not to talk about that.
Okay, so I'm not saying it's easy, and it's also not easy to go out, but if you value your relationship, you have to do this. Let me be honest with you. Children are the biggest competitors for the success of your marriage. Now, let's not make any mistake. Children are the biggest bracha, the greatest blessing.
Write that down, Alana. What did you, Rabbi? I just want to freeze there. What is it? Did I hear you right? Children are the biggest competitor to success in your marriage. To what did you say?
To romance, to success, to bonding as a couple. You know, again, children are the biggest bracha in the world. They're the greatest blessing, but they come with very real needs. And you have to pay attention to your children, and you have to do homework with them or give them whatever they need. But that's going to take both of you as a couple away from each other. And anytime there are kids in the picture, you connecting as a couple almost doesn't happen. So you have to realize that while children are obviously the biggest blessing in the world, they are also the biggest competitor for the success of your marriage. And you have to set boundaries. There has to be time when you, as a couple, go out without your children, and the children are not on the topic of discussion. And they'll get used to it. They'll understand it. I know many mothers that, well, how can my Ruchi, how can she do homework without me? And my Moshe, he won't know what. Your children will do very, very fine. By the way, if you're concerned as a parent, the single greatest ingredient you could give your children for their success is a happy home. Because you see, the parents, especially when your kids are little, you are the center of gravity. Mommy and daddy are basically the center of their world. If there's friction, if there's strife, especially if there's a real separation, everything starts coming apart. Does that mean gravity is no longer going to work? Does that mean the walls are going to come in? To your child, the most important thing for their success is for you to have a good marriage, a successful marriage. And what that requires is setting boundaries. There have to be time when you and your spouse connect without the children, without discussing the children, without the children's involvement, because you have a marriage. Besides being parents, you're also married to each other. And that means remaining as friends and lovers. And that requires time and focus.
Right. And this issue is, there's two aspects to that. And this is very crucial from what Rabbi is saying. One is the boundaries, physical boundaries to, set your date night and get that set up, and to make sure if you and your husband are having this talk about something important and the kid keeps interrupting, saying, no, you may not interrupt right now. I mean, unless it's an emergency or somebody's falling out the window, God forbid. But that it's not just physical boundaries, and it's also emotional boundaries. You have to understand from the deep root of yourself that this is the priority, that this is going to be, that there are many, many times where you're going to have to put your husband first before the children. And this is not Leah Richheimer or Rabbi saying, this is a 3,000-year-old bulletproof track record of success from Har Sinai, from our tradition from 3,000 years ago, that says your spouse is your number one priority. You're his most important priority, and he's your most important priority. And they may look very different. It might be that, you're spending more time wondering, what's he thinking? What's he feeling? And he's busy getting his work done so that he can buy the food or whatever. Maybe you're working and you need to buy the food. I don't know. That's irrelevant. The point I'm saying is that in the heart of hearts, from your kishkas, from your insides, to know that that's your top priority. And that's going to be a game changer in terms of, right now we're talking about how that comes out in the real world, which is date night. Okay. But also in everything you do, to understand that. And again, this is one of those try this at home things. If you're hearing this for the first time, everybody who's gone home and tried these kinds of things, like, oh my gosh, my husband is so loving lately, Leah. What did you do? Rabbi, this is incredible. Did you have a private class with my husband? No, this actually is bulletproof and it works. But for people who are hearing this the first time, you're like, what? Like, really? Try it. Okay, hold on. We've got to go back to this question, Sarit. Go ahead. I want to make sure.
So somebody asked me first from Starting Times live stream. Ariella said, hi, thank you for the show. She asked, what is the best way to navigate times which seem to disrupt the state of working on marriage? Rabbi Shafier said, you have to have a state of working on romance. So she says, what about the times when they're disrupted, such as when a spouse or the kids are under the weather for a few days?
Okay, listen, every marriage has challenges, life has challenges, and there's no panacea that's going to solve all of mankind's problems. The key is to understand the priority for the success of your family. And as Mrs. Richheimer said, for the success of your children. If you want your children to be wholesome and happy kids, you have to have a solid marriage. If you want to bring them up properly, you have to connect. That means you have to have boundaries. Now, there will be situations that are inevitable. Someone's sick or things happen. Okay. But if you have this as a ritual, we go out weekly and we spend time together. 9:30, everything stops. By the way, I just recently set a couple on this tremendous, life-changing new idea. 9:30, electronics stop. Zero, nothing. They shut off the phone, shut off the computers. 9:30, the world stops. And guess what? They have time together, time to talk, time, whatever, but no longer with Facebook or Instagram or being distracted or whatever. It's time to actually bond. So you have to set boundaries and you have to recognize the value of it. And if you don't, you're going to pay the price, because what's going to happen is you just start drifting. You don't realize why, you don't realize what, but all of a sudden you're in different worlds and you're no longer connecting. You have to prioritize it. You have to set it as a very, very important thing, and you have to keep that.
Rabbi, we are going to write that. Alana's writing that down. We're making a meme out of that. Okay, we're going to post that to 20,000 people because that is not lights out and not lights out. Electronics off at 9:30. I love it. We'll put your name on it so you get the credit for that. That is gorgeous. I'm in love with it. Okay, question for you. Hold on. She's looking. Boy, we're getting lots coming in. One of the things I want to talk about on the date. You're actually on the date. You're sitting across from your husband. You're annoyed at him because last week he said he would, do blah blah blah, and he didn't bring the dinner, and he was supposed to. Whatever. You had a terrible day. You're feeling a little bit nauseous because you ate something funny. And now you're sitting down across from him, and you're like, you're mad at him. You're mad at the world, and you're mad at all your kids, and the babysitter didn't show up. You took a sub babysitter who you're terrified is gonna, kill the kids, God forbid. So there you are. You're sitting at the date. Now what, Rabbi?
Okay, you're in trouble. No, you're right. You're painting a very good picture. I'm afraid of reality, and that's why it takes focus, and that's why it takes work. And the work is, again, to remember that we're a couple. Now, what that means is we're spending time together now with one goal in mind, just to enjoy each other's company. And let me stress this. I can't stress this enough. Enjoying each other's company is not an opportunity for me to solve the problems with my spouse. Exactly what you brought up. Let's say it's time to bring up the fact that you were late. It's time to bring up the fact that you bounced a check. And it's time for me. No, that doesn't belong on a date. Now, there are times for those discussions. And it could be that at a certain point in the date, if things are going very well and you have a good relationship, you could bring that up. But it's not only is it not the focus, my recommendation is, unless your marriage is really exquisite, don't bring it up on a date. A date is one goal, to just enjoy, to be with each other. But I can't get this out of my mind. You have to. But it keeps gnawing at me. I'll tell you one thing. If it keeps gnawing at you and you bring it up on the date, all you're going to do is deepen the rut. Because you see, I would say 80% of the problems in marriage are the disconnect. Meaning, yes, you have to learn how to live together, and there's what to be discussed about navigating life together, but it's the relationship, it's the love, it's the bond, it's the connection, that's the glue of the marriage. If that's there, then we figure out a way, my way, your way, we figure out a solution to it. But if that piece is missing, then anything else is just irrelevant, because we're going to fight about everything, and everything we will fight about. So the key on date night is not to work on issues, not to work on family business. It's just to go out and have a good time, to enjoy each other's company. Exactly what you did when you were dating. Now, for those of us who are watching this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can't see me when I'm flagging, whatever, because
Nope.
Oh, yikes. Okay, so sorry, then I'm going to verbally be a little rude. Is that I don't, it seems like you have two people sitting across from me that silent. Like, if you're not talking about the kids, you're not talking about running the business, family business, you're not whatever. I like this.
So what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? Do you understand how sad that is? Do you understand how sad that is? We stopped being lovers. We stopped being partners. We're co-managers of the family business. And the only other thing we focus on is changing each other. Well, good morning, America. You're supposed to be married. That's not a marriage. You want to be a manager and co-manager, so go find a business arrangement.
Give a list of topics that would be appropriate on a date.
Oh, 1 second. If I have to, okay. I had a woman who, after I explained to her the necessity, the absolute how vital it is for her to go out, and then she asked, but how long is the date? I said, 3-4 hours. She said, what would we talk about? And that's exactly the point. That means that your relationship has drifted apart. And it could be at that point you need certain, you'd have to do a little homework. What that means is you find clever things to do on dates. Go Google it, and things to discuss on dates. And in the beginning, until you get used to being married again, you may have to find 100 list of 100 questions to ask on a date, because it'll prompt you and begin allowing you to connect again to your spouse. But again, not as a co-manager of the family business, not as the one who's got to take care of the dishes or the chores it's my spouse, my lover, my you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
I do, but for people who to ease into this, I think it's, practical things. So it could be that before you go on your date, let's say you say, okay, our date night's going to be Wednesday night because that's when these business meetings over, whatever. And he doesn't have a stressful Thursday and I don't have a stressful, whatever it is. So you decide Mitzi Shabbos or Sunday or whatever it is. Let's say it's Wednesday night. So on Tuesday, you have a little reminder on your phone that says, check up on, a couple of interesting websites on what his hobby. He's very into, bowling or archery or who has hobbies these days? It's so sad. We don't take any time for ourselves. We're too busy on our phones doing it. But anyway, something, and, on Tuesday night, prepare like 2 or 3 topics or 5 topics, and maybe have 20, or keep a list on your phone. Anytime you think it, you're in the grocery line, add to that list. And, that's just a way to warm you up. And as Rabbi said, once you get going and get in the routine of being back the way you were when you were dating, then it'll come more naturally. But at least this way, it won't be awkward, and you won't just default to doing what you always do, which is to talk about how bad, Moshe is at math.
Yeah, right. Someone's suggesting, Leah, that to actually do an activity. So, like, if you're not able to, and that many hours of talking might be too hard, doing like bowling or going to, walking in like beautiful garden, going someplace where you're actually, doing something so that you can comment on the things around you, plus for someone like eating with like silence because you have nothing else to talk about.
Okay, so that's a very important point. And Mrs. Richheimer asked the question, what's the difference between dating when you're single and dating when you're married? And the answer is, when you're single, you know that you have to keep the dates interesting. When you're married, you think it'll just default and it'll be okay. And that's the mistake. You see, when you're single, there's a lot of thought should this be an active date, should not be an active date, how are things going? And you'll think about it. Whether it's the guy or the girl, you'll think about it. That's exactly what you have to do when you're married. Now, hopefully once your relationship gets to a point of, I'll say normalcy, but I hate to use that word, but I mean it. You don't have to spend that much time planning, but especially if things are strange, you haven't gone out for a while, and then you have to plan. Activities are a great idea. It could be anything from Dave and Buster's, as you say, going out, it could be whatever, miniature golf, whatever you find enjoyable. And all you have to do is spend a little time researching. I once created a list. I have a list of things to do on dates. If you want, send me an email, rebbe@theshmooze.com. I'll gladly send you a list. I had a Google list of hundreds of things. And when I was doing a marriage transformation boot camp.
How do you spell it? Rebbe at?
REBBE at theshmooze.com, THESHMUZ.com.
Okay.
I was doing a marriage transformation boot camp. This was 50 couples who were married, long-term marriages, and they were having a lot of issues. So one of the things we did was sort of plan dates. And I asked everyone to contribute ideas of what to do. And we created this entire it was a very nice little database of things to do. So again, email it to me, please. I'll gladly send it to you. But really the point is that if you spend a little time thinking, how could we enjoy ourselves? But again, that's the point. Enjoy ourselves as a couple. What should we do? What do we enjoy? So some people like walking, some people like sitting around, some people like, you have to find what your activities or your things that you enjoy until you, again, reconnect in a normal sense. By the way, I have to interrupt with this observation for what it's worth. Corona was a very interesting litmus test of marriage. I'll explain to you why. I'm not here to brag, in any sense. We're married 34 years. My wife and I spent the past year in the house together. And I have to tell you, it was a pleasure. It was absolutely a pleasure. We worked together, we spent time, the whole day was basically together, but it was beautiful. Why? Because it's my best friend. And now don't get me wrong, it took a lot of work. But do you understand how many couples had great suffering during this time? Because suddenly you're thrust together and suddenly you have to navigate life together. And for the first time, maybe in years, you actually, oh my goodness, who is this person? What do I do? And you start rubbing. So if you've recently gone through Corona and you had that little experience and you found it to be rough, okay, great. Here's a reset time. And now it's time to reconnect, but reconnect without the stress, without the hassle, by going out of the house and by leaving your comfort zone and leaving behind the problems. You spend a few hours a week just connecting, just reignite, and then you'll come back. Believe me, the problems will remain. They'll still be there when you come back. The same worries, the same diagos will still be there. But hopefully, as a couple, you'll be more connected. You'll be more bonded.
Can I ask Rabbi, and we've got lots coming in. Okay, Rabbi had mentioned the commitment, love, and learning to live together. Can you explain those three? And I also forget, I didn't write down, what are those, the 3 secrets to marriage? What is that?
Three pillars.
What is
three
it?
pillars. Three pillars.
But also, is this part of, the Rabbi has this amazing book I love the title. The 10 dumb mistakes very smart couples make.
The 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. Not dumb, really dumb. And I want you to know where this title comes from. Again, I've sat with hundreds of couples, and so many times they're killing each other, but there's no issue. It's not like he's a drug addict and she's some shopaholic. It's not their personality problems. They're good, reasonable people. And the only problem is they're missing each other. They're not getting it. They don't understand each other. And they're doing, excuse my expression, dumb things. So the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. You go to theshmooth.com. You can get a copy of this pre-publication. It's not out yet. It'll be in the stores hopefully September time. But I went through the 10, what I found the most common dumb mistakes that couples make. Because again, it's sad because you can ruin your marriage, ruin your happiness, ruin your family over things that have no significance, no consequence.
So what is that? Sorry. Is that the 3 pillars? Is that that cover? So you're going to explain that. Hold on. Let's take a question first. I'm sorry. They're both flagging me down. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Okay.
Okay. So I have a few questions. So one is for date night. Hubby often says after a full day of work, then Mincha Ma'ariv, that there's no time. Also, he's not comfortable with hotels, etc. So they could give, Rabbi Shafier could give ideas from couples that don't take hours, but because he doesn't have that much time and he doesn't have a lot of time. So
I have a very simple answer. I have a simple answer is quit. Quit.
Quit.
Quit. If you would like to have a successful marriage, but you don't have the time to have a successful marriage, you will not have a successful marriage. It takes time. If you're so busy that you can't spend 3-4 hours a week together, then that's a problem. And by the way, as a Rav, if you would come to me, if a young man, a young woman would come to me and say, I don't have time to do Mincha, Ma'ariv, etc., I'd say, okay, I'll take this one on my shoulders. You daven b'yechidus. You daven on your own Ma'ariv. Don't worry about the minyan. If you can't find 3-4 hours, that without that, you take that into account. But you have to spend time together. There's no shortcuts. I'm going to get in great shape, except I'm not going to work out. I'm going to lose 20 pounds, except I'm not going to diet. And I'm going to have a great marriage, except I'm not going to spend time connecting with my spouse. It doesn't work. There are no shortcuts. If you're not going to devote the time, if you're not going to religiously devote the time to bonding, to connecting, guess what? It's not going to work.
Wow. Scary. Okay, last question, then I'm going to go back to the pillars.
Wait, so before the last question, it's so funny that Rabbi Shafier said about COVID being a time where he and his wife really connected. So, Leah, I always tell my in-laws, Baruch family, they live this type of thing, and they have it. And so COVID, they were amazing because they love it together. But date night, I remember this till today. I was married maybe 2 years. We had a little baby, and I called them up to see. I called my mom up to see to babysit for our baby because we wanted to enjoy. We had to go somewhere and she said, "Oh my gosh, Sarita, I would love to babysit, but Abba and I have a date night, and we're going out." And I'm thinking,
excellent, beautiful.
And I was really bothered. And they were going outside to Barnes and Nobles, and they get books, and they pick books together, and then they read, and they share what they read, and they do whole thing. Anyways, it's in Barnes and Nobles, so I can't bring it there, and whatever. I was so bothered. Now, in my later years, I literally think, what is them? She knew her boundaries, she knew date night was important, and she loved her grandkids, and she loved us, but she had her boundaries. Date night was sacred, and she was not going to break things.
Gorgeous. That's gorgeous. Okay.
So from somebody asking who said that dating, they said, is it really true? I mean, it all seems wonderful, but is it truly true that couples do date nights weekly, especially with big families? And is doing date night is 3 or 4 hours like what you're thinking, because it seems like a whole lot of time for people that just don't have time.
Right. So I want you to just digest what you're saying over there. Can we as a couple actually connect for 3-4 hours, 2-3 hours a night, a week? Can we actually devote and dedicate that time, or are we too busy? So what that means is as follows. Everything else is a priority. The last priority is my marriage. It's my kids, it's the shul, it's my job, it's my family, it's everything else comes first. my marriage comes last. So if there's some time left in the week, then I'll gladly go out with my spouse and dedicate to connecting to creating a good marriage. If there is no time left, everything else comes first. My marriage comes last. But as Mrs. Richheimer said, your first relationship, your first primary responsibility is to your spouse, is to bond, is to connect, to be a couple. That's the center of your family, and that's the center of everything you should be doing. And that is not the last priority, but the first priority. So the first thing you do in your weekly schedule is you set up date night. Okay, it's Tuesday night from X to X. Now, everything else we're going to fill in the remaining time, because if it is your first priority, you don't forget to eat, you don't forget to sleep, hopefully you don't forget to daven. These are things you do because you have to do them, right? Well, guess what? If you want to have a good marriage, you want to have a successful marriage, you have to spend time together. And everyone who says, not us, we don't need it, you could try it, but I'm afraid to tell you the results are not really good, because time after time after time, I see couples on such an ongoing, regular basis. They get along. They both have the same ideals. They both have the same interests in life. And they're both good people, but they start drifting apart, and suddenly the issues become tremendous and the problems become real. And before you know it, they're in very, very deep water. So it's not worth it. And really, first priority is your marriage. You block away that time first. Everything else comes after.
Wow. So Rabbi's saying that even, you're going along and I have a good marriage. I'm fine with my marriage. You're saying even still, even those people still need to have date night.
I have one Talmud who I call a Talmud. He was in my high school shiur when he was 17. He's now in his 40s, and we kept up all these years. And whenever I call, immediately pick up the phone. I called him one Tuesday night, and he didn't pick up. I was surprised. And 2 hours later, I called again. He didn't pick up. He calls me the next day, apologized. I'm sorry, I couldn't pick up because I was on date night. I said, oh, I love it. Tuesday night religiously for decades now, he goes out. Now, I want to explain to you what happens. Not only do they have a great marriage, but inevitably things happen. Things in life, people get sick, there's stress, there's trouble, people lose jobs. If your marriage is solid and you have the rituals to maintain it, even when the troubles in life come about, you still have a way of repairing, you still have a way of connecting. But if you don't have that ritual in place, and someone loses a job, someone gets sick, and before you know it, we used to have a good marriage. We used to be close, but now we're not. And then things begin spiraling out of control. So I think it's the best investment you can make. You have to focus on it. It's a priority, and it's something that will pay back. And by the way, it's not that it should be pleasant, I hope. It should be enjoyable, I hope. And if it's not, that should be the biggest sign. If you say, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to do? That should be the greatest indicator to you that, wait a minute, there's something lacking. This is my best friend. Best friends who love each other, and I can't even spend 2-3 hours together just enjoying our company. So that should be the first indicator. It should be enjoyable, it should be fun, and it has to be a religious ritual.
What if couples, it's empty nesters and they spend all their time together anyhow? Is it important for them to go?
Okay, so my wife and I are working on that. The last two are being a little resistant. We're trying to shoo them out. We're trying to get to that point. But you're right. It could be that if you're an empty nester and you spend hours, it's still, by the way, not a bad idea to go out. And you should know something. My wife and I often will go out for lunch, even though, again, we're in a little different, most of our kids are married and we're in a different, age gap, we'll so call it. But the point is, you still should have rituals. It could be then, you're right, it's not as important because you're spending a lot of time together. Nevertheless, I think it's recommended and it's a good idea even then to go out regularly.
Okay, fine. I want to get back to pillars. We have more questions coming in, but I want to get to the pillars, but I also want to, the title of the show is called Date Night Disaster. So I'd like to also, if you can, maybe while you're explaining the pillars, to bring up what, how date night, how a couple of date nights didn't do these 3 pillars and what the results were, maybe something like that. But anyway, just right now, just go over the pillars. I'm asking way too much.
Okay, let's start with the pillars. Okay. 3 pillars to a successful marriage: commitment, love, and learning to live together. Commitment means I know that Hashem picked the perfect person for me, ideally suited, perfectly matched. This is the right one. And that gives me the commitment to work on the marriage, stay dedicated to it, and to remain. The love in the marriage, that's the glue that keeps it together on a day-to-day basis. All the commitment in the world, if there isn't a bond of love, you are
But how do you, wait, can we go back to the commitment? Because what if you feel like you didn't marry the right guy? I get that question virtually all the
So the
time.
first thing that happens is when you stop working on the love and you don't learn how to live together, then you assume Hashem made a mistake. But I have a little secret to reveal today. God doesn't make mistakes. And they set you up. By the way, unfortunately, at this point, I've been involved in many, many divorces. And I'd like to share with you the vast majority of divorces in our community should not happen. They should not. I've said this to my wife on multiple times. They're a match made in heaven, living in Gehenna, living in purgatory. But it's because they don't know how to be married. They're not working on it. They don't, and the love, the learning to live together. And so the first thing that happens is if you don't work on the marriage, you assume Hashem made a mistake. And then you're ready to dump this one and find a new set of problems with a second marriage and find a whole new host, a whole new constellation of issues. So the first thing to realize is Hashem doesn't make mistakes. Hashem chose the right one for me, ideally suited. It may take a while to adjust. It may take a little maturity. It may take learning how to live together. But number one, that commitment comes from the fact that I know Hashem chose the right one. Number two, the love in the marriage. Love means, again, everything that lovers do, maintaining that vibrant, solid relationship together. But number three is the trickiest one. Number three is learning to live together. Now, you could be committed and you could love your spouse, and many couples are, but they can't live together. They love each other, but can't live together. And living together is a very difficult trick because we all fall prey to one problem. I define reality based on my experience. The way I experience things is reality. And therefore, my spouse just has no right to our feelings, to emotionality, to our temperament, to whatever it may be. I want to give you, excuse me for giving a coarse example, but I want to give exactly this example. A young man comes home from work, 6:30, opens his apartment door, and as he's opening his door, he says to himself, wow, Baruch Hashem, I married such a sober, sane, intelligent girl, not one of these flighty dames. She's put together and she's so grounded, and he's really happy. He's already married 6 months, so ecstatic. He opens the door and he sees his grounded wife on the chair, screaming, honey, what is it? Honey, what? What? Cockroach! A cockroach! Ah! And he looks at her, goes, huh? Walks over to the cockroach. You can come down now, honey. What just happened? So he judged her based on his experience. His experience is that cockroach is not scary. I have 4 boys and 2 girls. I said that backwards. I have 4 girls and 2 boys, sorry. Anyway, what happens invariably is when any of the girls would see a bug, they would get one of their brothers to come. If it was the baby brother, make sure he doesn't eat it. The girls are afraid of bugs. Guys weren't. I don't know why, but that was the reality of my house. And many women are. Most guys aren't. Okay. Now, because to him, bugs are not scary, therefore he assumes there's nothing to be afraid of. And what she's doing is carrying on. And what he's doing is he's judging her based on his experience. I want you to know that this is a Maisa Shaya. This actually happened. And I want to show you round 2 of this little event. And round 2 is he's in the Beis Medrash and he's learning, and he doesn't even have a cell phone because of the Masmid. He's very, very involved in learning. And his friend brings him a phone. It's your wife. Something's happening. And picks up the phone. Yes, honey, what's up? Dear, what? Please, what? Please come home. Why? What's up? There are 2 of them. Hangs up the phone. He says, I don't believe it. She wants me to leave the Beis Medrash. She wants her to stop learning because there's 2 bugs. He gets in a car fuming, smoke coming out of his ears. And he gets behind the wheel, drives home, and walks into the apartment. And there she is up again. He walks over, scrunch, turns to her and says, I hope you're satisfied, turns around and walks out. Okay. Now, what's happening there is the key critical mistake that we all make in marriage. He judges her and by his experience, and she judges him by her experience. Let me explain what I mean. Let's reverse roles a little bit. Let's assume it was him in the apartment, but not 2 cockroaches. Let's assume it was 2 German shepherds. I guarantee he would not be up on the chair. He'd be out the fire escape down the block because German shepherds are scary. Bugs aren't. Now, and because he judged her based on his experience, he's furious at her. What is our problem? Why would she stop me from something important for something so unimportant? And why would she interrupt something that's so meaningful for something so trivial? And unless he's able to climb out of his world and experience reality from her world, he'll never be successfully married. Why? And because it's true. In his world, it's a stupid request to ask a husband to leave what he's doing to kill a bug. But to her, it's not. To her, it's frightening. To her, it's scary. And unless he learns to climb into her world, he's never going to be a good husband. But the corollary to that also is she has to recognize that he needs some education. You see, it's true. For most guys, bugs aren't scary. And when she then takes the attitude, he's such a cruel creep. What's wrong with the guy? He has to make fun of me also. It's true. He was callous. But she has to recognize that he has a different emotionality. And the great secret of marriage is learning that my experience doesn't define reality. And my experience is my experience. That's the way I experience things. But that's not reality. My spouse may have a very different reality. And my spouse is absolutely entitled to be the person that they are because that's the way Hashem created them.
Yes, unbelievable.
We're having a little pushback.
Okay. Okay.
Tons and tons of hearts on Instagram, but we're having a little pushback where somebody wrote, honestly, I don't agree with 3 to 4 hours weekly as a point of rule. It sounds too simplistic. Would love to, but there are too many other factors to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Okay. So I get the pushback all the time. When I do a marriage seminar, I get the pushback. Who could afford it? It's so expensive. A babysitter. Who can find a babysitter? My husband just started a new business. And believe it or not, all that pushback, I have a simple answer. Is it too expensive? What does a divorce lawyer cost? You don't have time? What about running 2 households and shuffling the kids to visitation rights? Or your husband started a new business? How's that business going to do when he has to do alimony payments as well as take? I guarantee it's cheaper, a lot more time efficient, and a whole lot more fun to go out than the consequence. And you're right, it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic because the world has inculcated this nonsense in our minds that everything has priority. Facebook, Instagram, that's important, but spending quality time on developing as a person, developing our marriage, that doesn't rank. So you could be right, but I sort of would question where, I don't mean this to the person asking the question, but people who ask that question that way 5 years later, 10 years later, and they find themselves in a place often that's not where they plan to be. And I have to be honest with you, if you really don't have the time, I have a biggest time saver you could ever have. Shut off your social media accounts. And I guarantee you will glean so much time. You'll find hours and hours and hours more in your day. And guess what? No one's going to miss you and you're not going to miss anybody. But they're not going to know that I had oatmeal with raisins before I went to work out. Yeah, they're not going to know it. And they're not going to see the pictures of me with my family. Yeah, it'll be fine. I guarantee you'll be happier. Your marriage will be more successful if you get off social media. But if you say you can't, okay. But again, the first priority is your marriage. And if you're not going to invest the time, if you're not going to spend time, I'm afraid to say you're going to pay the price.
So wow, that's pretty whoa, right? I know other guys are like, whoa. So here's the thing. Okay, we totally hear you, Rabbi. But is there baby steps we can take now? Jumping to 3 to 4 hours a week when there's 7 kids under 7 in the house, and whatever, that just is too big of an ask. Is there some to ease ourselves in, and also to spend 4 hours, trying to think of what to say seems very
impossible. It's almost like it's too insurmountable.
It's too insurmountable, and also, having 4 hours of trying to think of what to say just sort of points to, then your husband starts wondering, gee, what's wrong with my, we've drifted apart already. So is there some, step-by-step way that people can do this?
Right, and somebody is writing, they thought maybe the rabbi meant 3 to 4 hours per month is more realistic. They said, it's hard to believe. I think
per year, 3-4 hours per year, or every 10 years. And you go out every Shemitah. Every 7 years, you go out once, and then you're Yotze. You're right. That's correct. And so anyone who asks the question, I ask you this question. How did you do with the Corona test? When you took the Corona marriage test, how good was it? How connected were you? How comfortable was it? And if the answer is anything less than stellar, I think what you recognize is that it requires work. Now, all right, listen, you can't do it. I'll settle for 2 hours, but 2 hours going out, not in the house, going out, getting dressed and going out. Going out means leaving the house. By the way, sometimes people who are really, really time good time managers, and they really spend time doing things. Ask me what the solution is. So sometimes I'll agree to the following. If you have a pretty good marriage and things are going okay, if you agree to a 3/4 of an hour walk every night, but that means 5 nights a week, that's also okay. Rabbi, are you crazy? 45 minutes, 5 times. First of all, you'll get in good shape. It'll be fine. It'll be healthy. You'll be well. Have a time to connect. But again, the problem is there. You too easily get into the family business stuff. So it's more difficult. It's only if your marriage is pretty good. I don't know what to tell you. You know, and people wonder, what's wrong with my marriage? Why are there so many marriages failing? Why is there so much divorce? Why is this? You know, I don't know what to tell you. If we're not going to accept the answers, then we're going to continue the problem. And if you're going to just say, I'm sorry?
Think about it. It's so sad because if you take all the time that you're going to weddings, community things, PTA, whatever you do during the week. There's so many outside things you're doing, or going out to lunch or going shopping. You're wasting so many hours throughout the day. You really are. That like you can't give your husband that like 2 hours a week.
It's a question of enjoyable. I mean, it might be enjoyable for someone to go shopping or be with their girlfriends and do you have this recipe and blah, 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 whatever they're doing. I don't know who does lunch these days, but let's just say, okay, or their social media, whatever, and they feel fulfilled by that when they're posting, and all their sisters and the cousins are all posting in and saying, oh, you look great and whatever. That's very fulfilling. Whereas sitting there with your husband who you're mad about and whatever, that's hard work to be there and try and think of, and Tuesday night, the night before, think of all kinds of topics to bring up. That's hard. So they fall to the default of what's easier, what's more enjoyable and more instant gratification. So I think what Rabbi is saying is very, very hard. But does Rabbi have any median steps that a person could take to get to the 2 or 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week?
So again, my hesitation is that the medium becomes the ultimate goal. In other words, listen, can you start every other week? The answer is you could start. The problem is if it ends there, it ends there. I don't know what to say. In other words, listen, if you find that you're going to too many weddings, bar mitzvahs, and community functions, I'll be honest, stop doing it. It doesn't take priority over your marriage. You're going to someone's bar mitzvah or someone's marriage who you barely know. You meet them in shul, you say hi. If you don't go, okay, you're not going to go. But if your marriage falls apart, your marriage falls apart. You see, and people who really understand life get this. The problem is we get so busy, we get so caught up, and this is a priority, that's a priority. And again, the marriage is no longer a priority. So guess what? You end up paying the price. I would love to say that there's take this pill and it'll cure all evils. There is a pill, but that pill is time, dedication. You got to spend time together.
Prioritize it. Prioritize.
Yeah.
So let's hear some date night disasters and how to avoid them.
Okay. So again, date night disaster number 1 is talking family business. Good. Date night disaster number 2 is settling all of the issues in my marriage. That means date night, convenient. We have 3 hours. Let's go. I'm angry at you. I'm upset at you. This should change. That should. So everyone takes out their laundry list and they start working on their spouse. That is a recipe for disaster. Now, but let's understand why. The goal of a date is to connect. Anytime I'm going to say, I'm not satisfied with what you did, I'm not happy with you, what do you think your feelings are going to be about that? Even if you agree, and even if you say, I'm going to make amends, and it will improve, the warm and fuzzies aren't exactly there. Now, don't get me wrong. It's vital for a couple to be able to communicate, to be able to work on things. But the question is when and how. Date night usually is not a good time to do it. Again, sometimes if you have a very good marriage and the date is going very well, and you could bring up something that's not that toxic, maybe. But generally, it's a very, very bad idea. And there are other times to talk about that, other times to discuss it. But generally speaking, date night is a time, again, to just enjoy each other's company.
Okay, let's hear more date night disasters. I want to hear more things that people should avoid doing.
And that's not enough.
No, I mean, okay. So you're just saying, just avoid family, avoid issues or whatever, and focus on entertaining topics that you would talk about if you're actually dating the person. You find interesting things to talk about.
Ms. Rishama, can I go back to something for a minute? I want to share some interesting perspective. I was once giving a marriage seminar, and a young fellow comes over to me and says, "Rabbi, yeah, you have to help me. My wife, she's overweight. I offered her everything. I offered her a trainer. I offered her a nutritionist, and she just won't lose the weight. And it's really bothering me." And he explained he's a physician. He works in a hospital and is around many thin young nurses. And he doesn't want to look at them. He wants to have eyes for his wife, and she just won't lose. Rabbi, what do I do? So what would you say to a young man who asked you that question? So I said to him, let me ask you a question. When you married your wife, was she slim and attractive? Yeah, but 3 kids later, she put on a little bit of weight on the first kid, a little bit of weight on the second kid, a little bit of weight on the third kid. And so I said, I want to ask you a little simple question. Have you ever met a woman who's 40 pounds overweight and says, yes, I love it. I just love the fact that when I look in the mirror, I'm much larger than I used to be. I guarantee she's not happy about it. But for whatever which reason, there's too much on her plate right now to work on it, and it's not going to happen. You have 2 choices. You either embrace her as she is, or you suffer. For whatever reason, right now, it's not on her radar. It's not going to happen. And you either accept her as she is, or you suffer. And I'm afraid to tell you, if you suffer, it's going to be very, very ugly. Now, that is a very simple and obvious concept to explain to a young man. But what about when a young woman comes to me with the problems of he's late, leaves his socks on the floor, he's whatever the litany of excuses are. Now, again, did he work on it? Do you discuss it? Did you ask him? I asked him 45,000 times to do it, and he's 40 years old, and he still leaves his socks on the floor. What's wrong with him? So I say to her the exact same thing. Madam, he should pick up his socks, no question about it. If he was a mensch, he would do it. But guess what? Some people have some strengths, some people have different strengths, and some people, all of us, have flaws and weaknesses. This is his weakness. And you either are going to accept it as he is or suffer. But who's going to teach him? Who's going to show him? Not you. If his mother didn't teach him by now, you want to take over her role, and you're going to treat your husband as if he's your son. He's going to look at you like you're his mother, and it's not going to go well. He's not going to learn. And you have a choice. And you either accept him as he is, flaws and all, or you suffer. But you see, this is the point. We all have this line in the sand we draw. I can accept anything but. And you ever notice that I can accept anything but, and that but is something that's my strength and my spouse's weakness. If I'm always late and she's always on time, well, let's say the opposite. Let's say I'm always on time and she's always late. I can accept anything, but not a woman who's late. That I can't accept. Now, why is that? Because again, my reality is that people are punctual, and it's important, and it comes easy to me, and it's something significant. And if I expect the same of my wife, and why won't she do it? And the intolerance that I have for her coming late is based on one thing. My experience defines my reality, and I can't accept otherwise. So that's the great secret of learning to live together. Learning that my experience is my experience. It doesn't define reality. I'm going to have to accept my spouse as they are. I'm not going to change him. Should he work on it? Should she work? Everybody should work. No question about it. And there are things that you'll expect them to work on, but there are certain parts that are integral to the human being, or at least innate, they're built in, and they're not going to change. And the sooner you learn to accept it, the better a marriage you're going to have.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and then we want to find out how to get in touch with you, Rabbi. So go ahead with the last question.
Okay, one last question. That's a hard one, because I have somebody asking, which it's an important question because it deals with the other aspects, but she says, I have another question for dating before marriage. If both couples have been married, especially because there's so many divorced single women, is it okay on the first or second date to talk about the divorce, that they could just get it out and get the details out if they feel like they're open about it and they just want to be able to move forward, or is that something they should wait on?
I mean, could you do it? Yes. Is it wise? I don't think so. You see, the first thing you want to find out on the first date, second date, third date is there a connection? Is there some commonality? Do you have things in common? And that meaning it might be the ugliest divorce in the world. It might be the cleanest divorce in the world, but it won't be relevant if we aren't made for each other. So I would say, that information you try to get ahead of the date. You try to find out the best you can, whatever information you can find out before you get on the date. The information you're going to get from the person sitting across from you is going to be sanitized anyway. It's always, and not even purposely, we all view things from our vantage point. And I've been there again countless times where each person describes, he describes her that she flies on a broom at night. Her description of him, he's the meanest, coolest guy. And you meet both of them, they're reasonable, nice people. But what happens is when push comes to shove, everybody becomes a victim. So you try your best not to listen to their version of it. Try to get the information outside the context of marriage from people who are involved. Best if you could get from people actually involved in the marriage earlier on, or at least someone who was involved in the divorce part of it. Get the information there. Then when you go out, you want to see one thing. Are we compatible? Is there a connect? Is there something to talk about? Now, if things develop and you see that you're getting to a certain point, if you want to discuss the divorce, you can discuss it in terms of how it affects this person now. I wouldn't look for any details about the divorce from this discussion because, again, everyone's going to have their version of things. Everyone's going to have their clean version where they're the knight in shining armor. And even if he doesn't mean it that way, but inevitably we're all biased. So any details about the divorce, I would use outside sources. And what you want to find out on the date after things are progressing and you see the connection is how do they deal with it emotionally? How do they process it? How does it impact them now? That would be something that would be relevant.
Great. Okay, we're out of time, but we just want to hear, how do people reach Rabbi? It's theschmooze.com.
Yeah, Rebbe, REBBE at theschmooze.com, THESHMUZ.com. And if you'd like to get a copy of the book, The 10 Really Dumb Mistakes that very small couples make, there's a banner on the top of the webpage over there. It's theschmooze.com. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, Rebbe at theschmooze.com, REBBE, theschmooze.com.
Later, there's, if you want to take, can I just, one person is writing something very important.
Okay, good. Fine. Okay.
She said that her husband works, and she works, they're both full-time workers. They both work full-time and it's tough. She said, and men, they hate pressure, especially they've not been brought up with date night. She really wants to do this, but she feels like she's being asked to do something that's out of her reach. How does she do it?
Okay, so you have to find a time. Let's say you're right, you can't do it a weeknight. What about Sunday? What about Shabbos? What about finding some time where you can spend a few hours together as a couple and make that a ritual? It doesn't have to be Tuesday night, it doesn't have to be Thursday night. It could be Saturday night, it could be Sunday, it could be whenever. And now listen, if you're working 168 hours a week, we have a different problem. Assuming that there's some downside. By the way, I had a couple who asked me the following question. They're having great marital strife. He works till 11 o'clock at night, and she's a nurse. She's on the very early shift, so she leaves the house by 6 a.m. He comes in, she's sleeping. He leaves, she leaves, he's sleeping. They're like two ships that pass the night. Guess what? You're going to have problems. So you have to find the time. Again, you have to be creative, but you have to find a ritual. It's got to be on a regular basis. And let's shoot for 2 hours. 2 hours where you go together. You want to take a walk. You want to do something, but you go out together with the goal of connecting, spending time together, and you have to make it work.
Okay, we're out of time. Rabbi, this is fantastic, game changer for many people. Very grateful to you. And I've got to go now. I've got to go have my date night. Okay, Ms. Leah Retimer, thank you so much for joining the Ladies Talk Show, and we will see you next time.